The phone rang at exactly 3:47 in the morning. Detective Rebecca Martinez was used to getting calls at strange hours, but something about this one felt different. The voice on the other end was shaking with panic. "Please, you have to help me. Someone broke into my house. My wife is hurt badly. I think she might be dying." The caller identified himself as David Thompson. He lived on Maple Street in Westlake, one of the nicer neighborhoods in Cleveland. Rebecca grabbed her badge and gun and headed out into the cold October night. When she arrived at the Thompson house, the first thing she noticed was how perfect everything looked. The lawn was perfectly cut. The driveway was clean. Even the mailbox looked like it had just been painted. This was clearly a family that cared about appearances. David Thompson met her at the front door. He was a tall man in his early 40s with brown hair and kind eyes. He was wearing pajamas and had small cuts on his hands. Blood had dried on his fingers. "Thank God you're here," David said. His voice was still shaking. "She's upstairs. The ambulance is already with her." Rebecca followed David through the house. Everything inside was just as perfect as the outside. The furniture looked expensive. Family photos covered the walls. In every picture, David and his wife Jennifer looked happy together. They were always smiling, always touching each other's hands or shoulders. "Tell me what happened," Rebecca said as they walked up the stairs. David took a deep breath. "I was sleeping in our bedroom. Jennifer was next to me. Around 3 in the morning, I heard glass breaking downstairs. At first, I thought maybe our cat had knocked something over. But then I heard footsteps. They reached the master bedroom. Paramedics were working on a woman lying on the bed. Rebecca could see that Jennifer Thompson had been hurt very badly. Blood covered the pillows and sheets. Her face was swollen and bruised. I got up to check what was happening," David continued. "When I got to the top of the stairs, I saw a man in our living room. He was going through our things. When he saw me, he ran toward me. We fought, and that's how I got these cuts on my hands." Rebecca looked at David's hands. The cuts were small and shallow. They didn't look like the kind of injury someone would get in a serious fight. "What happened to your wife?" "I don't know. After the man ran away, I came back upstairs and found Jennifer like this. She was unconscious. There was so much blood." David's voice broke. "I called 911 right away." Rebecca walked around the bedroom looking carefully at everything. The room was messy, but only in certain spots. The dresser drawers were open and jewelry was scattered on the floor, but other things seemed untouched. "Did you see what the intruder looked like?" "It was dark, and everything happened so fast. He was tall, maybe 6 feet. He was wearing all black clothes and had something covering his face." The paramedics lifted Jennifer onto a stretcher. As they carried her out, Rebecca heard one of them talking on his radio. "We have a female victim with severe head trauma. She's unconscious and not responding. We need to get her to the hospital immediately." David followed his wife to the ambulance. Rebecca could see tears in his eyes. "Will she be okay?" he asked the paramedic. "We're doing everything we can, sir. The doctors at Cleveland General will take good care of her." After the ambulance left, Rebecca began looking at the rest of the house. David had said the intruder broke in through a window in the basement. When she went downstairs, she found the broken window easily, but something was wrong. Most of the glass was lying outside the house, not inside. When someone breaks a window to get into a building, the glass usually falls inward. This glass had clearly been broken from the inside. Rebecca made a note in her book and kept looking around. In the living room, she found that several expensive items were missing. The television was gone, so was a laptop computer. Jennifer's purse was empty, and her car keys were missing. But other valuable things were still there. An expensive watch was sitting on the coffee table. Cash was still in a bowl by the front door. If this was really a robbery, why would the thief leave these things behind? Rebecca called for the forensic team to come and examine the house. While she waited, she talked to some of the neighbors who had come outside after seeing the police cars and ambulance. "David and Jennifer are such a nice couple," said Mrs. Wilson from next door. "They've lived here for about 5 years. David works for an insurance company, and Jennifer volunteers at the animal shelter downtown. Have you ever seen them fight or argue?" Rebecca asked. Mrs. Wilson looked surprised by the question. Never. They always seemed so happy together. Jennifer was always talking about how lucky she was to have David. She said he took such good care of her. But when Rebecca talked to Lisa Parker, who lived across the street, she heard a different story. Jennifer and I became close friends over the past year, Lisa said quietly. She started coming over for coffee more often. At first, she just wanted to chat, but then she began telling me about problems at home. What kind of problems? David had been acting strange. He was always checking their bank accounts and getting angry about money. Jennifer said he had started hiding mail from her and wouldn't let her see their financial papers. She was worried that something was wrong, but David kept telling her everything was fine. This was interesting. Rebecca made more notes. When the forensic team arrived, they began taking pictures and collecting evidence. Rebecca watched them work while thinking about everything she had learned. David's story had some problems. The broken glass suggested someone had broken the window from inside the house, not from outside. The missing items seemed randomly chosen, while other valuable things were left behind, and David's injuries were very minor for someone who had fought with an intruder. At the same time, David seemed genuinely upset about his wife's condition. He had stayed by her side until the ambulance took her away. He answered all of Rebecca's questions without hesitation, but Rebecca had been a detective for 15 years. She had learned that the most dangerous criminals were often the ones who seemed the most normal on the outside. As the sun began to rise over Maple Street, Rebecca decided that she needed to learn more about David and Jennifer Thompson. Their perfect house and perfect marriage might not be as perfect as they appeared. The investigation was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the attack on Jennifer Thompson. She was still in the hospital, fighting for her life in the intensive care unit. The doctors had put her in a special sleep to help her brain heal. They told David that she might never wake up. Detective Rebecca Martinez spent those 3 days digging deeper into the case. Every time she looked at the evidence, more questions came up. The crime scene told a story, but it wasn't the same story that David had told her. On Thursday morning, Rebecca met with Officer Jake Miller, who had been helping with the investigation. They sat in the police station with all the evidence spread out on a large table. "Let's go through everything again," Rebecca said. "Something about this case doesn't feel right." Jake picked up the photos from the basement window. "The glass pattern still bothers me. I've seen a lot of break-ins, and this doesn't look like someone breaking in from outside." Rebecca nodded. "That's not the only problem. Look at this list of stolen items." She pointed to her notes. Television, laptop, some jewelry, and Jennifer's purse. But they left behind a watch worth $3,000 and $200 in cash that was sitting right on the kitchen counter. Maybe the thief was in a hurry after fighting with David? Maybe. But look at the blood patterns in the bedroom. Rebecca showed Jake the forensic photos. Jennifer was clearly attacked while she was lying in bed. There's blood on the pillow where her head was. But David said he found her after fighting with the intruder downstairs. Jake studied the photos. "So you think David is lying?" "I think. We need to find out more about David and Jennifer's marriage. Yesterday I talked to more neighbors. Not everyone thinks they were as happy as they seemed." Rebecca had spent the previous afternoon talking to people who lived near the Thompson house. Most of them said nice things about the couple, but a few neighbors had noticed some strange things. Tom Richards, who lived 2 houses down, had seen David leaving the house at odd hours over the past few months. "I work night shifts, so I'm usually awake when most people are sleeping," Tom had told Rebecca. "I started noticing David's car leaving around midnight or 1 in the morning. He would come back a few hours later." When Rebecca asked David about this, he said he sometimes had trouble sleeping and would go for drives to clear his head. It wasn't impossible, but it was strange. Another neighbor, Maria Santos, had told Rebecca something even more interesting. "About 2 months ago, I was walking my dog past their house around 10 at night. I could hear them arguing inside. Jennifer was crying and David was yelling. I couldn't make out the words, but he sounded very angry. This was different from what other neighbors had said. Most people thought David and Jennifer never fought." Rebecca decided it was time to look more closely at the Thompson family's finances. She got permission from a judge to examine their bank records and credit reports. What she found was shocking. David and Jennifer's bank account showed that they were in serious financial trouble. For the past 2 years, more money had been going out than coming in. David had been taking money from their savings account almost every month, but the biggest surprise was what Rebecca found when she looked at David's personal credit report. He had taken out 3 different loans in the past year, borrowing a total of $50,000. Jennifer's name wasn't on any of these loans. Rebecca also discovered that David had taken out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago. This meant they now owed the bank almost $400,000 on a house that was only worth about $350,000. The most interesting thing was a life insurance policy on Jennifer. The policy was worth $750,000. David had increased the amount of the policy just 8 months ago, right around the time he started borrowing money. "Jake, look at this," Rebecca said, showing him the insurance papers. "If Jennifer dies, David gets $750,000. Jake whistled softly. "That's a lot of money, especially for someone who seems to be broke." Rebecca was starting to see a pattern. David was in serious financial trouble, but he had been hiding it from his wife. If Jennifer died, the insurance money would solve all his problems, but Rebecca needed more evidence before she could arrest David. She decided to take another look at the crime scene. This time, she brought a forensic expert named Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Chen was an expert in blood spatter patterns and crime scene analysis. "Show me what you think happened," Rebecca said when they got to the Thompson bedroom. Dr. Chen spent an hour examining the room with special lights and measuring tools. Based on the blood patterns, Jennifer was definitely attacked while she was lying in bed. The person who hit her was standing right here next to the bed. Could she have been moved here after being attacked somewhere else? No, definitely not. There would be blood trails if that happened. She was attacked right in this spot. Dr. Chen also found something interesting in the bathroom connected to the bedroom. There are traces of blood in this sink. Someone washed their hands here after the attack. This was important evidence. David had said he was downstairs fighting with the intruder when Jennifer was attacked. But if the attacker washed his hands in the upstairs bathroom, why didn't David see him? Rebecca was building a case, but she still needed to find the weapon that was used to hurt Jennifer. The doctors said she had been hit with something heavy and hard, probably metal. The forensic team had searched the entire house and yard, but hadn't found anything that could have been used as a weapon. This suggested that whoever attacked Jennifer had taken the weapon with them when they left. Rebecca decided to expand her search. She got permission to search David's car in his office at the insurance company where he worked. In David's office, Rebecca found something very interesting. Hidden in David's desk drawer was a folder full of papers about life insurance claims. The papers explained how long it usually took for insurance companies to pay out money after someone died. There were also printouts from websites about home security systems and how to disable burglar alarms. One of the papers had information about how long it took police to respond to 911 calls in different parts of Cleveland. When Rebecca confronted David about these papers, he had an explanation ready. "I work for an insurance company," he said. "I deal with these kinds of claims every day. It's normal for me to have information like that." But Rebecca wasn't convinced. Why would David need to know about police response times if he was just processing insurance claims at work? The case was getting more complicated, but Rebecca felt like she was getting closer to the truth. David Thompson wasn't the perfect husband. He pretended to be. He was in serious financial trouble, and he had a lot to gain if his wife died, but Rebecca still needed to prove that David had actually planned and carried out the attack on Jennifer. She needed to find the weapon, or find someone who had helped David, or find some other piece of evidence that would prove his guilt. The investigation was far from over. Marcus Reed sat in the small interview room at the Cleveland police station. Detective Rebecca Martinez and Detective Tom Rodriguez sat across from him. A tape recorder was running on the table between them. "Marcus, we want to hear the whole story from the beginning," Rebecca said. "Tell us how you first met David Thompson." Marcus took a deep breath. "I met David about 2 months ago at a bar downtown. I was having some drinks after work and David was there alone. He looked upset about something, so we started talking." "What did you talk about?" David told me he was having money problems. He said he owed a lot of people money and didn't know how to pay them back. He seemed really desperate. Tom leaned forward. When did David first mention the plan to rob his house? It was about 6 weeks later. David called me and asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. He said he had an idea that could help both of us make some money. Marcus explained that David's plan had seemed simple at first. David would be away from home on a business trip. Marcus would break into the house, take some specific items that David had chosen, and leave. David would come home, discover the burglary, and file an insurance claim. The insurance company would pay David for the stolen items, and David would give Marcus $5,000 as payment. But the plan changed, Rebecca said. Yeah. About a week before we were supposed to do it, David called me and said he wanted to be there when it happened. He said it would look more real if he was home and could say he fought with the burglar. Marcus said that David had given him detailed information about the house. He knew which window would be easiest to break. He knew where the valuable items were located. He even knew the code to turn off the house alarm system. David told me that Jennifer would be deeply asleep because he was going to give her some strong sleeping pills with her dinner. He said she wouldn't wake up no matter how much noise we made. But she did wake up, Tom said. Marcus nodded sadly. When I got into the bedroom to get her jewelry, Jennifer opened her eyes and saw me. She started screaming and trying to get out of bed. David came running upstairs and started yelling at me. What was David yelling about? He was angry that Jennifer was awake. He kept saying that she wasn't supposed to wake up and that now everything was ruined. Jennifer was crying and asking David what was happening. She couldn't understand why her husband was working with someone who had broken into their house. Marcus said that David became more and more panicked as Jennifer continued to scream. David was worried that the neighbors would hear and call the police before they could finish staging the burglary. That's when David grabbed something heavy from the dresser. I think it was some kind of award or trophy. He told Jennifer to be quiet, but she kept screaming. Then he hit her with it. Rebecca felt sick to her stomach. Just once? No. Jennifer fell down, but she was still conscious. She was begging David to stop and asking why he was doing this to her. But David hit her again and again until she stopped moving. Marcus said that after David attacked Jennifer, he stood over her body for several minutes. He seemed to be thinking about what to do next. David told me to finish taking the things we had planned to steal. He said we had to make it look like a real burglary or the police would figure out what really happened. Then he went into the bathroom and washed the blood off his hands and the weapon he had used. What happened to the weapon? David took it with him when we left the house. He said he would get rid of it somewhere far away where the police would never find it. But Marcus had more to tell. David had also given him specific instructions about what to do after the fake burglary. David told me to wait exactly 2 hours after I left the house. Then he would call 911 and report the break-in. He wanted to give himself time to get his story straight and to make sure he looked like he had been in a fight. So David waited 2 hours before calling for help for his wife? Yeah. Jennifer was lying there bleeding and unconscious for 2 hours while David made sure his plan would work. This information made David's crime even worse. He had not only attacked his wife, but he had also delayed getting medical help for her. If David had called 911 immediately, Jennifer might have had a better chance of recovery. Rebecca asked Marcus to describe exactly what had happened during those 2 hours. David made some small cuts on his own hands with a kitchen knife. He messed up his hair and tore his pajamas a little bit to make it look like he had been in a fight. He also moved some furniture around to make the living room look like there had been a struggle. David had thought of everything. He had even coached Marcus on what to do if the police ever questioned him. David told me to say that I was working alone. He said if I ever got caught, I should tell the police that I had never met him and that I just happened to pick his house to rob. But David had made one big mistake. He had paid Marcus with checks from his personal bank account instead of cash. This created a paper trail that connected them together. I told David that paying me with checks was stupid, but he said it was the only way he could get that much money quickly. He promised me that the police would never connect us because they would think it was just a random burglary. Rebecca and Tom spent 3 more hours getting every detail of Marcus's story. They also searched Marcus's motel room and found more evidence. Hidden under the mattress was a notebook where Marcus had written down David's instructions for the fake burglary. In David's own handwriting were the house alarm code, a map of the house layout, and a list of items to steal. The evidence against David was overwhelming. Phone records, the stolen items, Marcus's detailed confession, and physical evidence from the crime scene all proved that David had planned and carried out the attack on his wife, but Rebecca knew that David would not confess easily. He had spent weeks planning this crime and had thought he could get away with it. When they arrested him, David would probably deny everything and claim that Marcus was lying. Rebecca also knew that David's lawyers would try to put all the blame on Marcus. They would argue that Marcus was a career criminal who had decided to rob the Thompson house on his own, and that David was just another victim. It was going to be a difficult case to prosecute, but Rebecca was confident that the evidence would prove David's guilt. The question was whether Jennifer would survive long enough to see her husband brought to justice. As Rebecca and Tom prepared to arrest David Thompson, they both hoped that Jennifer would someday wake up and learn that the man who had tried to kill her was going to prison for the rest of his life. Detective Rebecca Martinez and Detective Tom Rodriguez arrived at Cleveland General Hospital at 6 in the morning. They had come to arrest David Thompson, but they wanted to do it quietly. The hospital was full of sick people who didn't need to see a dramatic arrest. They found David in the same waiting room where he had been spending most of his time for the past week. He was sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. To anyone watching, he looked like a man who was exhausted from worrying about his wife. Rebecca gently shook David's shoulder. "David, we need you to come with us to answer some more questions." David opened his eyes and looked confused. "What time is it? Has something happened to Jennifer?" "Jennifer's condition is the same, but we've learned some new information about the night she was attacked. We need to talk to you at the police station." David stood up slowly. "Can't we talk here? I don't want to leave Jennifer alone. I'm sorry, but we need to do this at the station. It shouldn't take very long." During the drive to the police station, David asked several times what new information they had found. Rebecca and Tom told him they would explain everything once they got to the station. David seemed nervous, but not overly worried. He probably thought that he had covered his tracks well enough that the police couldn't prove anything against him. When they got to the station, Rebecca led David to the same interview room where they had questioned Marcus Reed. She offered David coffee and asked if he wanted to call a lawyer. "Do I need a lawyer?" David asked. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to help you find the person who hurt Jennifer." "That's up to you, David. But I have to tell you that you're not just a witness anymore. We think you might have been involved in what happened to Jennifer." David's face changed. The worried husband expression disappeared, and Rebecca could see anger in his eyes. "That's ridiculous. Someone broke into my house and almost killed my wife. How can you think I had anything to do with it?" Rebecca placed a folder on the table. "David, we found the man who broke into your house. His name is Marcus Reed, and he's told us everything." David tried to look surprised. "You caught the guy who attacked Jennifer. That's great. What did he tell you?" "He told us that you hired him to break into your house and steal certain items so you could file a false insurance claim. He also told us that when Jennifer woke up and saw what was happening, you attacked her with a heavy object." "That's insane," David said, but his voice was shaking. "I've never heard of anyone named Marcus Reed. If he said I hired him, he's lying." Tom opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "David, we have your phone records. You called Marcus 15 times in the month before Jennifer was attacked. The last call was made at 11:30 p.m. on the night of the attack." David stared at the papers for a long moment. "I don't know what those records show, but I never called anyone named Marcus Reed. We also found the items that were stolen from your house. Marcus had them in his motel room. He also had a notebook with your handwriting in it. The notebook contains your house alarm code and a map of your house." David was quiet for several minutes. Rebecca could see him thinking, trying to come up with an explanation that would make sense. Maybe this Marcus guy broke into my house before and learned the alarm code. Maybe he's been watching our house for weeks and planning this robbery. "David, We also know about your financial problems. We know you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars and that you increased Jennifer's life insurance policy 8 months ago. This seemed to hit David hard. His face turned red and he started breathing heavily. My finances are my private business. Just because I owe some money doesn't mean I tried to kill my wife. Rebecca pulled out another piece of paper. We found something else, David. We searched your work computer and found that you had been researching how long it takes for insurance companies to pay out life insurance claims. I work for an insurance company. Of course I would have information like that on my computer. You also researched untraceable poisons and ways to make a murder look like an accident. Can you explain why you needed that information for your job? David was trapped and he knew it. All his careful planning had been for nothing. The police had found Marcus, they had the phone records, and they had evidence of his financial problems. But David still had one more lie to try. Okay, maybe I did hire Marcus to help me fake a burglary for the insurance money. But I never wanted Jennifer to get hurt. Marcus was only supposed to take some things while Jennifer was asleep. When Jennifer woke up, Marcus must have panicked and attacked her. Rebecca had been waiting for David to try this defense. David, Marcus told us that you were the one who attacked Jennifer. He said you hit her multiple times with a heavy object while she was begging you to stop. Marcus is lying to save himself. He's a criminal. You can't believe anything he says. Tom pulled out the final piece of evidence. David, we have one more thing to show you. Jennifer had installed a hidden security system in your bedroom about 3 months ago. She was worried about your behavior and wanted to record what was happening in the house when she wasn't around. David's face went completely white. What are you talking about? Jennifer hid a small recording device in the bedroom. It was voice-activated and recorded everything that happened the night she was attacked. This was a lie. There was no recording device. But Rebecca wanted to see how David would react. David put his head in his hands and started crying. You don't understand. I was desperate. I owed money to some very dangerous people. They were threatening to hurt Jennifer if I didn't pay them back. So you decided to hurt Jennifer yourself? No. The plan was just to fake the burglary and get the insurance money. Jennifer was supposed to stay asleep. She wasn't supposed to wake up and see what was happening. David was finally starting to tell the truth, but Rebecca needed him to admit to attacking Jennifer. What happened when Jennifer woke up, David? David was quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked up at Rebecca with tears in his eyes. She started screaming and wouldn't stop. I tried to calm her down, but she kept saying she was going to call the police. I couldn't let her do that. Everything would have been ruined. So you hit her? David nodded slowly. I just wanted her to be quiet for a few minutes so Marcus and I could finish what we were doing. I didn't mean to hurt her so badly. I didn't think a few hits would cause so much damage. But you kept hitting her even after she fell down? She was still conscious. She was still trying to get up and get to the phone. I had to make sure she couldn't call for help until after Marcus left. Rebecca felt sick listening to David describe how he had brutally attacked his own wife, but she needed to get the complete confession on record. David Thompson, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Jennifer Thompson and for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. As Tom put handcuffs on David's wrists, David looked up at Rebecca one more time. Is Jennifer going to be okay? Rebecca stared at him coldly. You left your wife bleeding and unconscious for 2 hours while you made. Sure, your story sounded believable. You're the last person who should be asking about Jennifer's condition. The news of David Thompson's arrest spread quickly through Cleveland. Local television stations ran the story on their evening news programs. Newspapers printed articles with headlines like, Husband accused of trying to murder wife for insurance, money, and perfect marriage hides deadly secret. The people who lived on Maple Street were shocked. Many of them had known David and Jennifer for years. They had thought the Thompsons were the ideal couple. I can't believe David would do something like this, said Mrs. Wilson, who lived next door to the Thompsons. He always seemed like such a nice man. Jennifer was so lucky to have him, or at least that's what we all thought. But other neighbors were not as surprised. Lisa Parker, Jennifer's friend who lived across the street, told reporters that Jennifer had been worried about David's behavior for months. Jennifer knew something was wrong, Lisa said. She tried to talk to David about their problems, but he would get angry and tell her to mind her own business. I think she was scared of him. While the community tried to understand how such a terrible crime could happen in their quiet neighborhood, the legal system began the process of bringing David Thompson to justice. David was charged with attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false police reports. If he was found guilty on all charges, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. David's family hired an expensive criminal defense lawyer named Robert Hayes. Hayes was known for defending people accused of serious crimes. He immediately began working on a strategy to keep David out of prison. Hayes told reporters that his client was innocent. David Thompson is a victim in this case, just like his wife, Hayes said. A career criminal named Marcus Reed broke into the Thompson home and attacked Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson had nothing to do with this terrible crime, but the prosecutors had a strong case against David. District Attorney Patricia Moore assigned her best prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Wilson, to handle the case. Wilson had been prosecuting criminal cases for 15 years. He had sent many murderers and violent criminals to prison. He was confident that he could prove David's guilt. The evidence against David Thompson is overwhelming, Wilson told reporters. We have phone records connecting him to Marcus Reed. We have financial records showing his motive, and we have a detailed confession from Reed explaining how Thompson planned and carried out this attack on his wife. The most difficult part of the case would be proving that David had intended to kill Jennifer, not just hurt her. Under Ohio law, attempted murder required proof that the defendant had specifically intended to cause the victim's death. David's lawyer would probably argue that David had only wanted to knock Jennifer unconscious so she couldn't interfere with the fake burglary. He would claim that David never intended to kill his wife. But Wilson believed he could prove that David's actions showed an intent to kill. David had hit Jennifer multiple times with a heavy object. He had waited 2 hours before calling for medical help, and he had researched life insurance policies and ways to commit undetectable murders. 3 weeks after David's arrest, Jennifer's condition began to improve. The doctors reduced the medication that was keeping her in an artificial coma. They wanted to see if she would wake up on her own. Jennifer's sister Carol came from Chicago to be with her. Carol sat by Jennifer's bedside every day, talking to her and playing her favorite music. The doctors said that familiar voices and sounds might help Jennifer wake up. On a Tuesday morning in late November, Jennifer opened her eyes for the first time in almost a month. Carol was holding her hand and reading to her from a book of poetry that Jennifer had always loved. "Jennifer? Can you hear me?" Carol asked softly. Jennifer tried to speak, but her voice was very weak. The breathing tube had been removed from her throat only a few days earlier, and it was still difficult for her to talk. "Carol?" Jennifer whispered. "What happened to me? Why am I in the hospital?" The doctors had warned Carol that Jennifer might not remember the attack. Brain injuries often caused memory loss, especially memories from around the time of the injury. "You were hurt, Jennifer, but you're going to be okay now. The doctors are taking very good care of you." Over the next few days, Jennifer's memory slowly started to return. She remembered having dinner with David on the night she was attacked. She remembered feeling very sleepy after dinner, much more tired than usual. But Jennifer couldn't remember anything that happened after she went to bed that night. She didn't remember waking up and seeing Marcus Reed in her bedroom. She didn't remember David attacking her. When Detective Rebecca Martinez visited Jennifer in the hospital, she had to explain that David had been arrested for trying to kill her. Jennifer stared at Rebecca in shock. "That can't be true. David loves me. He would never hurt me." "Jennifer, we have evidence that David hired a man to help him fake a burglary at your house. When you woke up and saw what was happening, David attacked you to keep you from calling the police." Jennifer started crying. "But why would David want to hurt me? What did I do wrong?" Rebecca explained about David's financial problems and the life insurance policy. She told Jennifer that David had been planning the attack for months. "David wasn't the man you thought he was, Jennifer. He was in serious debt and saw your death as a way to solve his money problems. It took several days for Jennifer to accept the truth about her husband. She had loved David and trusted him completely. Learning that he had tried to kill her was almost as traumatic as the physical injuries she had suffered. Jennifer's recovery was slow and difficult. The brain injury had affected her memory and her ability to concentrate. She had trouble walking and needed help with simple tasks like eating and dressing herself. But the doctors were optimistic that Jennifer would continue to improve. She was young and healthy, and her brain was slowly healing from the damage David had caused. Jennifer's family and friends rallied around her during her recovery. Lisa Parker visited her every day and helped her with physical therapy exercises. Carol took a leave of absence from her job in Chicago so she could stay with Jennifer. As Jennifer grew stronger, she also grew angrier about what David had done to her. She told Detective Martinez that she wanted to testify at David's trial. "I want to look David in the eye and let him know that his plan failed," Jennifer said. "I survived, and now he's going to pay for what he did to me." The trial was scheduled to begin in February, 3 months after the attack. Wilson was confident that he could get a conviction, especially with Jennifer's testimony. But David's lawyer was already planning his defense strategy. Hayes would try to convince the jury that David was a desperate man who had made a terrible mistake, not a cold-blooded killer. The battle for justice was about to begin. The trial of David Thompson began on a cold Monday morning in February. The courthouse in downtown Cleveland was packed with reporters, curious citizens, and Jennifer's family and friends. Judge Margaret Foster was presiding over the case. She was known for running a fair but strict courtroom. She had told both the prosecution and defense teams that she would not tolerate any delays or courtroom drama. Assistant District Attorney James Wilson gave his opening statement first. He stood in front of the jury box and looked directly at each of the 12 jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, deception, and betrayal. The evidence will show that David Thompson planned and carried out a vicious attack on his wife Jennifer because he wanted to collect $750,000 in life insurance money." Wilson explained that David had been living a lie for months. While Jennifer thought their marriage and finances were fine, David was secretly drowning in debt. He owed money to banks, credit card companies, and private lenders. When David realized that he couldn't pay back all the money he owed, he decided that Jennifer's death was the answer to his problems. He hired a career criminal named Marcus Reed to help him stage a fake burglary. When Jennifer woke up and threatened to ruin his plan, David brutally attacked his own wife. Defense attorney Robert Hayes had a different story to tell. He told the jury that David was not a killer, but a desperate man who had made some very bad decisions. David Thompson did hire Marcus Reed to help him fake a burglary, Hayes admitted. David was facing financial ruin, and he thought insurance, money would solve his problems. But David never intended for Jennifer to be hurt. When Jennifer woke up during the staged burglary, Marcus Reed panicked and attacked her. Hayes argued that Marcus Reed was not telling the truth about what happened that night. He said Marcus was trying to reduce his own prison sentence by blaming David for the attack on Jennifer. Marcus Reed is a violent criminal who has spent years in and out of prison. You cannot trust the word of a man like that. David Thompson may be guilty of insurance fraud, but he is not guilty of trying to murder his wife. The prosecution called many witnesses during the 3-week trial. Detective Rebecca Martinez testified about the inconsistencies in David's story and the evidence found at the crime scene. Marcus Reed took the witness stand and told the jury exactly what had happened on the night Jennifer was attacked. He described how David had planned every detail of the fake burglary and how David had brutally beaten Jennifer when she woke up. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt," Marcus testified. "David told me that Jennifer would be asleep the whole time. When she woke up and started screaming, David got angry and told me we had to stop her from calling the police. Then he grabbed something heavy and started hitting her with it." During cross-examination, Hayes tried to make Marcus look like an unreliable witness. He asked Marcus about his criminal history and suggested that Marcus was lying to get a lighter sentence. But Marcus stuck to his story. He admitted that he had made many mistakes in his life, but he insisted that he was telling the truth about David Thompson. The prosecution also called financial experts who testified about David's debt problems. Bank records showed that David owed almost $600,000 to various lenders. Credit reports showed that David had been desperately trying to borrow money for months before the attack. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic expert, testified about the blood evidence found at the crime scene. She explained that the blood patterns proved Jennifer had been attacked while lying in bed, not while standing up and fighting with an intruder as David had claimed. The most powerful witness was Jennifer herself. She walked slowly to the witness stand, still using a cane to help her balance. The brain injury had affected her speech, and she spoke more slowly than before the attack. Jennifer told the jury about her marriage to David and how happy she had thought they were. She described how David had become secretive and moody in the months before the attack. "I knew something was wrong, but David always told me not to worry about it," Jennifer testified. "He said he was handling our finances and that I didn't need to know the details." Jennifer also testified that she remembered feeling unusually sleepy after dinner on the night of the attack. She suspected now that David had put sleeping pills in her food. "I went to bed much earlier than usual that night. I felt like I couldn't keep my eyes open. Now I know that David drugged me so I would sleep through his plan to rob our own house." When Jennifer was asked to identify the person who had tried to kill her, she pointed directly at David. "That man sitting right there is my husband, and he tried to murder me for money." David showed no emotion during Jennifer's testimony. He sat quietly next to his lawyer and took notes on a legal pad. But several jurors were clearly affected by Jennifer's story. The defense called only a few witnesses. David's mother testified that her son was a good man who would never hurt anyone. Some of David's co-workers said that he had been under a lot of stress at work, but had never shown any signs of violence. The most important decision for the defense was whether to have David testify on his own behalf. Hayes knew that if David took the witness stand, the prosecutor would be able to question him about all the evidence against him. In the end, Hayes decided that David should not testify. "The prosecution has not proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt," Hayes told the jury during his closing argument. "You cannot convict David Thompson based on the word of a career criminal like Marcus Reed." But Wilson's closing argument was much stronger. He reminded the jury about all the evidence that proved David's guilt. The phone records, the financial problems, the life insurance policy, the forensic evidence, and Marcus Reed's detailed confession all pointed to the same conclusion. David Thompson planned this attack for months, Wilson told the jury. He hired Marcus Reed, he drugged his wife, and when his plan started to fall apart, he tried to kill Jennifer with his own hands. This was not a crime of passion or a terrible accident. This was cold-blooded attempted murder. The jury began deliberating on a Thursday afternoon. They had to decide whether David was guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false police reports. After 6 hours of discussion, the jury returned to the courtroom with their verdict. Judge Foster asked the jury foreman to read the decision. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant David Thompson guilty." Jennifer started crying when she heard the word guilty. Her sister Carol hugged her tightly. The jury also found David guilty on the fraud and false report charges. Judge Foster scheduled the sentencing hearing for the following month. At the IE sentencing hearing, Jennifer gave a victim impact statement. She told the judge how the attack had changed her life forever. "I will never be the same person I was before David tried to kill me," Jennifer said. "I have trouble remembering things. I get confused easily, and I need help with tasks that used to be simple for me. But the worst part is knowing that the person who did this to me was someone I loved and trusted." Judge Foster sentenced David to 25 years to life in prison for attempted murder. She also gave him additional time for the fraud charges, meaning David would probably spend the rest of his life in prison. "Mr. Thompson, you planned and carried out a vicious attack on your wife for no reason other than greed," Judge Foster said. "You showed no mercy for Jennifer, and this court will show no mercy for you." Marcus Reed had already been sentenced to 12 years in prison for his role in the attack. Because he had cooperated with the police and testified against David, he received a much lighter sentence. 1 year after the trial, Jennifer was still working on her recovery. She had moved in with her sister Carol and was receiving daily physical therapy and counseling. The brain injury had left her with permanent disabilities, but she was determined to rebuild her life. Jennifer also became an advocate for other victims of domestic violence. She spoke at conferences and support groups about her experience. People think domestic violence is always obvious, Jennifer told audiences. But sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who seems perfect on the outside. David fooled everyone, including me, for years. Detective Rebecca Martinez retired from the Cleveland Police Department 2 years after solving the Thompson case. She often spoke at police training seminars about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances when investigating domestic crimes. The Thompson case taught me that financial pressure can turn even seemingly normal people into killers, Martinez told other detectives. When someone has a lot to gain from another person's death, you have to take that very seriously. David Thompson is currently serving his sentence at a maximum security prison in Ohio. He will not be eligible for parole until he is in his 70s. He has never admitted his guilt or shown any remorse for what he did to Jennifer. The Thompson case became one of the most famous domestic violence cases in Cleveland's history. It showed that even people who seem to have perfect lives can be hiding terrible secrets. Jennifer Thompson's survival and recovery became a symbol of hope for other victims of domestic violence. Her courage in testifying against her husband helped ensure that justice was served.